The ultrasound image felt impossibly heavy in my purse, like it might burn a hole straight through the worn leather. 3 months I'd managed to keep this secret. 3 months of morning sickness disguised as food poisoning, of loose shirts and strategic scarves, of avoiding the piercing gaze of the man who had claimed me as his own, after one reckless night I couldn't bring myself to regret. I adjusted my uniform, a crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt required for all staff at Centonotti, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city, the place where I'd first caught Antonio Russo's eye, where everything had changed. Mia, table 7 needs more wine. Marco, the floor manager, snapped his fingers near my face, breaking my spiral of anxiety. And Mr. Russo's private room needs attending. Elena called in sick. My stomach dropped. I'd been deliberately scheduled away from the private rooms for months now. My own desperate request, after I discovered the pregnancy. After I realized I couldn't tell him. Couldn't risk being trapped forever. I can't. I started, but Marco was already walking away, shouting orders to the kitchen staff. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of the wealthy, the clink of fine crystal, the subtle notes of a piano played in the corner. I grabbed a bottle of Brunello di Montalcino, Antonio's preferred wine, and tried to steady my breathing. My fingertips felt numb and cold against the glass as I made my way toward the private dining room at the back of the restaurant. 2 men in impeccable suits stood outside the heavy mahogany door. I recognized Dante, Antonio's right-hand man, his face impassive as always. The scar running from his left eye to his jaw twitched when he saw me. "Miss Mia," he said, voice low as he opened the door. "It's been a while." I nodded, unable to form words. Had Antonio told them to keep an eye out for me? Did they know I'd been avoiding him? The weight of the ultrasound in my purse felt like it might drag me through the floor. The private dining room was dimly lit, all dark wood and deep red accents. 5 men sat around the table, but my eyes were drawn immediately to him, Antonio Russo, 6'2" of pure danger wrapped in a bespoke charcoal suit. Dark hair, meticulously styled, eyes the color of aged whiskey that missed nothing. Those eyes found mine the moment I stepped into the room, and the conversation around him instantly died. I watched his expression change, surprise, then something darker, hungrier. "Gentlemen," he said without looking away from me, "we'll continue this discussion tomorrow." No one questioned him. They simply gathered their things and filed out, nodding respectfully as they passed. Dante closed the door behind them, leaving me alone with the man I'd been running from, the father of my child. Antonio didn't speak at first. He simply studied me, his gaze traveling from my face down to my midsection, which I'd become expert at disguising, then back up again. I clutched the wine bottle like a shield. 3 months, he finally said, his voice deep and accented. 3 months you've been avoiding me, Tesoro. I swallowed hard. I haven't been avoiding you. I've been busy. A smile played at the corner of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Busy. Yes, I see. He gestured to the chair beside him. Sit. It wasn't a request. With Antonio, nothing ever was. I placed the wine on the table and sat, keeping my purse clutched tightly on my lap. My hands trembled slightly, and I knew he noticed. Antonio noticed everything. Pour, he instructed, pushing 2 glasses forward. I did as he asked, focusing on not spilling the deep red liquid. When I finished, he took 1 glass and slid the other toward me. Drink with me, Mia. My heart hammered against my ribs. I can't. I'm working. You can. And you will. His tone remained pleasant, but steel ran beneath it. Unless there's a reason you shouldn't drink. My eyes snapped to his. Did he know? How could he possibly know? He leaned forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Sandalwood and something darker, richer. Your friend Elena doesn't have the flu. She came to me, very concerned about you. Said you've been ill in the mornings. Said you've stopped drinking the staff wine after shifts. His eyes narrowed slightly. Said you've been hiding something. The blood drained from my face. Elena, my closest friend at the restaurant. She'd betrayed me to him. She works for you. It wasn't a question. Antonio shrugged one broad shoulder. Everyone in this city works for me, in one way or another. You should know that by now. I should have. I'd known who he was when I let him take me home that night. Known, but not understood. Not really. Not until I saw him calmly order a man's death over dessert a week later. Not until I realized I was carrying the child of one of the most dangerous men in the country. "Tell me why you're avoiding me," he said, voice dropping to that intimate register that still haunted my dreams. "Tell me what you're hiding in that purse you're clutching like it contains state secrets." My knuckles whitened around the leather strap. "It's nothing. Mia." Just my name, but loaded with warning. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my untouched wine. I have to get back to work. In one fluid motion, he was on his feet, towering over me. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. His presence alone was enough to freeze me in place. 3 months ago, you shared my bed for 2 weeks. You let me touch you, taste you, make you mine in every way possible. Then you disappeared from my life without explanation. His accent thickened with emotion. Now you won't look me in the eye. You won't drink with me. You clutch your bag like it holds your very life. He stepped closer. What happened to the woman who wasn't afraid of me? "I saw what you really are," I whispered. Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Though I couldn't believe a man like him could be hurt by anything I said. And what am I, Tesoro? A monster. The word slipped out before I could stop it. His jaw tightened. A monster who made you scream with pleasure. A monster whose name you called in the dark. He reached for me then, his hand settling on my hip. And the familiar heat of his touch sent a shock through my system. A monster you couldn't get enough of, if I remember correctly. I jerked away, bumping into the table. The movement sent my purse tumbling to the floor, its contents spilling across the plush carpet. Lipstick, wallet, phone, and the white envelope containing the ultrasound. Time seemed to stop as we both stared at it. Then Antonio moved, bending to pick it up before I could reach it. "No!" I lunged for the envelope, but he easily held it away from me. "What is this that you're so desperate to keep from me?" He studied the hospital logo on the corner. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Mia," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "What is this?" "Please," I whispered. "Please don't." But he was already opening it, already pulling out the grainy black and white image. I watched his face as he studied it, watched the most powerful man I knew go utterly still. Then his eyes found the typed information at the top. Patient name, Mia Collins. Below that, where I'd been asked to list the father's name, Antonio Emilio Russo. His fingers traced the letters of his own name, then moved to the small shape in the center of the image. When he looked up at me, his eyes burned with an emotion I couldn't name. "That's our child," he whispered. And everything I'd feared and fought against for 3 months crashed down around me. I backed away until I hit the wall, tears burning in my eyes. "I can't do this. I can't be with you, knowing what you are, what you do." In an instant, he was before me. One hand braced against the wall beside my head, the ultrasound still clutched in the other. "This changes everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything." "Nothing changes," I insisted, even as panic rose in my throat. "I won't raise a child in your world. I won't." His eyes darkened. "You think you have a choice?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "You are carrying my air, Mia. My blood. My future." His free hand came to rest, with surprising gentleness, against my still flat stomach. "You've hidden this from me for months. That time is over. You're coming home with me tonight. I can't." "You can. You will." He tucked the ultrasound carefully into his suit pocket and took my arm. "You belong to me now, more than ever. You and our child will be protected, cherished, given everything." His grip tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to show his resolve. "No one will ever threaten what's mine." The door opened, and Dante stepped inside, eyes sweeping the room and registering the tension immediately. "Sir?" "Bring the car around," Antonio said, not taking his eyes off me. "Miss Collins will be coming to the estate tonight." Dante nodded and disappeared again, leaving me alone with the father of my child and the weight of a future I'd been desperately trying to avoid. "Please," I tried one last time. You don't understand what you're doing to me. Antonio's expression softened marginally. He reached up to brush away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I understand exactly what I'm doing, Tesoro. I'm claiming what's mine. I'm protecting my family. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, holding me in place as he leaned down to brush his lips against my forehead. And I'm never letting you go again. With those words, I knew my life had changed irrevocably. The secret I'd kept hidden for 3 long months was out, and with it, any hope of escape. Antonio Russo had claimed me and our unborn child, and a man like him never surrendered what he considered his. The door opened again, and Dante stood waiting. Antonio's hand settled possessively at the small of my back, guiding me forward into a future I'd been running from since the moment I'd seen those 2 pink lines on a plastic stick. A future bound to a dangerous man who now had the most powerful hold possible over me, our child. The ride to Antonio's estate passed in tense silence. I sat as far from him as the leather back seat would allow, staring out the tinted windows as the city lights blurred past. My body was rigid, hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone white. I could feel his eyes on me, that unwavering gaze that seemed to see right through me. Dante drove with mechanical precision, his broad shoulders blocking most of my view through the windshield. Another man, Pietro, I vaguely recalled, sat in the passenger seat, his hand never far from the bulge beneath his jacket. Security. Always security. This was the world I'd been desperate to keep my child from. You need to eat, Antonio said suddenly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us since leaving the restaurant. When was the last time you had a proper meal? I didn't answer, didn't look at him. Mia. That commanding tone that brooked no argument. Answer me. Lunch, I muttered, still facing the window. I had a sandwich at lunch. He made a disapproving sound. Not enough. Not for 2. Those words, not for 2, sent a fresh wave of panic through me. This was real. He knew. There was no going back. The car turned onto a private road, trees forming dark sentinels on either side. In the distance, lights glimmered. Antonio's estate, a sprawling mansion set on 50 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds. I'd been here before, during those 2 weeks when I'd foolishly believed I could separate the man from what he did. Before I'd understood the full extent of his world. I want to go home, I said quietly, finally turning to face him. Antonio's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. You are going home. Your home is with me now. You can't just decide that. I can. I have. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the ultrasound, looking at it again in the dim light of the car. This decided it for us. There is no us, I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a mistake. A lapse in judgment. His head snapped up, eyes suddenly hard as flint. A mistake? Is that what you call what happened between us? I swallowed hard. You know what I mean. No, he said, voice dangerously soft. Tell me how what we shared was a mistake. Tell me how our child is a mistake. That's not what I... Choose your words carefully, Mia. It was a warning, delivered with deadly calm. The car pulled to a stop before I could respond, and Dante was opening the door on Antonio's side. Antonio tucked the ultrasound back into his pocket and stepped out, then extended his hand to me. I stared at it, paralyzed by the finality of what accepting it would mean. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Tesoro, he said quietly, for my ears alone. But make no mistake, you are staying here tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night after that. With trembling fingers, I placed my hand in his and allowed him to help me from the car. His grip was warm and secure, sending unwelcome tingles up my arm. My body remembered his touch, even as my mind rebelled against it. The mansion loomed before us, all old-world elegance and imposing stone. Lights glowed in many of the windows, and as we approached the grand entrance, the double doors swung open. A woman in her 60s stood waiting, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her dark eyes assessing me with undisguised curiosity. Sophia, Antonio greeted her. Prepare the blue suite for Miss Collins. She'll be staying with us indefinitely. Sophia's gaze flickered between us, lingering for a moment on my midsection before she nodded. Of course, Mr. Russo. Will she be needing dinner? Yes. Something substantial but gentle on the stomach. Bring it to my study in 30 minutes. I opened my mouth to protest being discussed as if I weren't present, but Antonio's hand tightened on mine in warning. Sophia disappeared inside, and we followed, stepping into the soaring entryway with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. Your things will be collected from your apartment tomorrow, Antonio said, leading me through the house. Make a list of anything you need immediately. You can't just... He stopped, turning to face me fully. I can. I will. You've hidden my child from me for 3 months, Mia. 3 months of a pregnancy I had every right to know about. Your autonomy in this matter ended the moment you decided to keep that secret. Anger flared, cutting through my fear. My autonomy? You think you own me because I'm carrying your child? I think, he said, stepping closer until I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze, that you made a unilateral decision affecting my flesh and blood. I think you plan to continue making those decisions without my knowledge or consent. His voice dropped lower. And yes, Tesoro, I think that what's mine is mine. You knew who I was when you came to my bed. I didn't know I'd get pregnant, I whispered. Something like a smile touched his lips. No? We weren't exactly careful, were we? All those nights, all those times I took you. How many times did I finish inside you without protection? Did you really think there would be no consequences? Heat flooded my face at his crude reminder of our passionate encounters. That's not what? Not what you want to discuss? Too bad. He resumed walking, pulling me alongside him through the grand hallway toward his study. We have much to discuss, Mia. Starting with why you thought you could hide this from me. The study was exactly as I remembered it. Walls lined with books, a massive desk of dark wood, leather chairs arranged before a fireplace where flames now crackled. The room smelled of him, that sandalwood cologne, fine leather, and something uniquely Antonio. Memories assaulted me, being bent over that desk, his hands in my hair, lying on the soft rug before the fire as he moved above me, sitting in his lap in the high-backed chair as he read to me in Italian. I shivered, crossing my arms protectively over my chest. Antonio noticed, of course. Cold? No. He studied me for a long moment, then crossed to a cabinet and poured himself a measure of amber liquid. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs by the fire. I remained standing, defiance the only power I had left. I want to go home. You are home. He took a slow sip of his drink. Sit down, Mia, before you fall down. You're pale. I'm fine standing. In 2 strides he was before me, his free hand cupping my chin and forcing me to meet his gaze. You will sit down because you are carrying my child, and you look like you haven't slept in days. You will sit down because if you faint, I will have you confined to bed for the remainder of your pregnancy. His thumb brushed my lower lip. And you will sit down because I asked you to. And I'm rapidly running out of patience. I jerked away from his touch and moved to the chair, sinking into it with as much dignity as I could muster. Antonio nodded, satisfied, and took the seat across from me, placing his glass on the small table between us. Now, he said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me why you ran. I stared into the fire, unable to meet his intense gaze. You know why. I want to hear you say it. My fingers twisted nervously in my lap. I saw you, that night at the restaurant, in the back room. I heard what you ordered done to that man. Antonio was silent for a moment. You knew who I was, Mia, what I am. From the beginning. Knowing and seeing are different things, I whispered. I thought I could separate the man from what he does, but I can't. And when you discovered you were pregnant, I closed my eyes. I couldn't bring a child into your world. A world of violence and a world of protection, he interrupted. Of power. Of never wanting for anything. He leaned closer. My child will have everything, Mia. Everything I didn't have growing up. Safety. Security. 2 parents. I looked up at that. 2 parents? You think we're going to play house now, be a happy family? Something dangerous flashed across his face. That's exactly what we're going to do. You can't force someone to love you, I said quietly. Love? He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. I don't need your love, Tesoro. I need your obedience, your loyalty. His eyes dropped to my stomach, your body, carrying my air. The words stung more than they should have. What had I expected? That he would profess some deeper feeling? That the weeks we'd spent together had meant something beyond physical pleasure and now, possession. And if I refuse? I asked, raising my chin. Antonio's smile was cold. You won't. You can't keep me prisoner, can I? He gestured around us. Look where you are, Mia. Look who I am. There is nowhere you could go that I wouldn't find you. No one who would help you against me. His voice softened slightly. But it needn't be a prison. This can be a home. Our home. You can have anything you want here, except my freedom, I said bitterly. His expression hardened again. Your freedom to do what? To take my child away from me? To raise my son or daughter without their father? He shook his head. No, that freedom you do not have. A knock at the door interrupted us. Sophia entered carrying a tray laden with food. A bowl of what appeared to be homemade soup, fresh bread, a salad, and a glass of milk. She set it on the table beside me, her eyes curious but kind. Thank you, Sophia, Antonio said. That will be all for tonight. She nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Eat, Antonio commanded. I looked at the food, my stomach rumbling traitorously. I hadn't eaten since that sandwich at lunch, and despite everything, I was ravenous. Reluctantly, I picked up the spoon and tasted the soup, chicken and vegetables in a rich broth that instantly warmed me. Antonio watched me eat, his expression unreadable. When I'd consumed about half the soup and most of the bread, he spoke again. How far along are you exactly? I set down the spoon. 14 weeks. He nodded, processing this. The morning sickness? Is it bad? The unexpected concern in his voice caught me off guard. It's better now. The first trimester was rough, and you went through that alone. It wasn't a question, but I could hear the accusation beneath it. I had to. No, he said sharply. You chose to. You chose to suffer alone rather than come to me. Rather than let me take care of what's mine. I pushed the tray away, appetite gone. I'm not yours. This baby isn't a possession. Antonio stood abruptly, looming over me. You are mine, Mia Collins. You have been since the first night you came to my bed willingly, since the first time you cried out my name. He braced his hands on the arms of my chair, caging me in. And now you carry my child, my blood. There is nothing in this world more mine than you are in this moment. His face was inches from mine, his breath warm on my skin. Despite everything, the fear, the anger, the resentment, my traitorous body responded to his proximity. Heat pooled low in my belly, my heartbeat quickening. He noticed, of course. A knowing smile curved his lips. Your mind can lie, Tesoro. Your body cannot. I turned my face away. Don't. His fingers caught my chin, turning me back to face him. Tell me you don't still want me. Tell me you don't remember how good we were together. It doesn't matter, I whispered. What's between us? It's not enough. Not for this. It's a start, he said, his thumb tracing my lower lip. The rest will come in time, and if it doesn't, his eyes darkened. Then we will find a way to coexist for the sake of our child, but you will stay, Mia. That is non-negotiable. He straightened, releasing me from the cage of his arms. Finish your dinner, then I'll show you to your room. He crossed to his desk and picked up a phone. I need to make some calls. Plans must be adjusted now that my circumstances have changed. I watched him as he spoke quietly into the phone, issuing commands in a mixture of English and Italian. This was the reality of who he was. A man accustomed to absolute control, to being obeyed without question. A man whose world operated by different rules than the one I'd grown up in. A man who was now inextricably tied to me through the child growing beneath my heart. I placed my hand on my still flat stomach, a protective gesture that had become habit in the week since I'd learned of the pregnancy. Whatever happened now, whatever future stretched before me in this gilded cage, I would protect this child from the world, from Antonio's enemies, and if necessary, from Antonio himself. As if sensing my thoughts, he looked up from his call, his eyes meeting mine across the room. A silent promise passed between us. His to keep us, mine to resist being kept. A battle of wills that had only just begun. And deep down, in a place I refused to acknowledge, I wondered which of us would truly win, or if victory for either would come at too high a cost. Sleep eluded me in the blue suite Antonio had assigned me. The bed was obscenely comfortable. The sheets Egyptian cotton. The pillows cloud soft, yet I tossed and turned, my mind racing with the day's events and the uncertain future that stretched before me. My hand kept drifting to my stomach. That instinctive gesture of protection that had become second nature. Dawn was breaking when I finally gave up on sleep. I padded to the enormous windows that overlooked the estate's manicured grounds. Morning mist clung to the landscaped gardens, giving everything an ethereal quality. Beautiful, but no less a prison. A soft knock startled me. Before I could respond, the door opened and Sophia entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Collins," she said, her tone formal but not unkind. "Mr. Russo thought you might appreciate some breakfast that won't upset your stomach." I glanced at the tray. Plain toast, a small bowl of fruit, herbal tea, and crackers. A surprising gesture of thoughtfulness. "Thank you," I said, suddenly aware of how rumpled I must look in the borrowed nightgown Sophia had provided last night. "Where is him?" Sophia's lips twitched at my deliberate avoidance of Antonio's name. "Mr. Russo left early for business in the city. He asked me to inform you that your belongings will be delivered today and that he expects you to rest." She set the tray on a small table near the window. "He also left this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a black credit card with my name embossed on it and a handwritten note. "For whatever you need, use it freely. The doctor will visit at 2 p.m. "A doctor?" I looked up at Sophia, alarmed. "Mr. Russo's personal physician. He's very discreet." Her eyes dropped momentarily to my midsection. "Mr. Russo wants to ensure everything is progressing well." Of course he did. "Control in all things." "I don't need his doctor," I said, tossing the card and note onto the bed. "I have my own doctor." Sophia's expression remained neutral. "I'll convey your feelings to Mr. Russo when he calls for an update." She turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Collins, if I may offer some advice." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Choose your battles wisely with Antonio Russo. He is not a man accustomed to being denied what he wants." Her eyes softened slightly. "And what he wants, more than anything now, is you and that child safe and well." After she left, I picked at the food, surprising myself by finishing most of it. The tea soothed my perpetually unsettled stomach, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the immediate need to rush to a bathroom. With nothing else to do, I explored my suite. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, with a deep soaking tub and shower big enough for 3 people. The walk-in closet was empty, save for a few items Sophia had provided. The nightgown, a robe, and simple cotton clothes that wouldn't have been my first choice but would suffice. I tried the door to the hallway, unlocked. So I wasn't a prisoner, at least not technically. I wrapped the robe tighter around myself and ventured out. The mansion was eerily quiet, my bare feet silent on the marble floors. I remembered some of the layout from my previous time here. The grand staircase, the formal dining room, the library. I made my way downstairs, wondering if I'd encounter security, but the place seemed deserted. I found myself drawn to Antonio's study, the scene of last night's confrontation. The door was closed but unlocked. I hesitated, then slipped inside. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the space differently than the firelit intimacy of the previous evening. I moved to his desk, running my fingers over the polished surface, remembering, despite myself, how it felt to be pressed against it, his hands firm on my hips, his voice rough in my ear. A framed photograph caught my eye. I picked it up, surprised to see a much younger Antonio, perhaps 16 or 17, with an older man who shared his strong features. They stood before this very house, the man's hand firmly on Antonio's shoulder. Antonio wasn't smiling. I'd rarely seen him truly smile. but there was pride in his posture, in the set of his jaw. "My father," came a voice from the doorway. I nearly dropped the frame, spinning to find Antonio watching me, his expression unreadable. He wore another impeccable suit, though his tie was loosened, suggesting he'd just returned. "I didn't hear you come in," I said, setting the photo down carefully. "Clearly." He entered the room fully, closing the door behind him. "Did you sleep?" "Not really." He nodded as if he'd expected this answer. "The doctor will give you something safe for pregnancy, if you'd like." "I told Sophia I don't need your doctor." Antonio sighed, crossing to the bar cart to pour himself water. "Did you eat the breakfast I arranged?" "Yes," I admitted. "Good." He took a drink, studying me over the rim of his glass. "You're exploring." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm trying to understand my prison." His jaw tightened. "This isn't a prison, Mia. Then I'm free to leave?" "No." The single syllable hung in the air between us. "You're not." I crossed my arms. "Then it's a prison, no matter how gilded." Antonio set his glass down and crossed to me in 3 long strides. He didn't touch me, but his presence engulfed me, that unique combination of power, danger, and something undeniably magnetic. "You carry my child," he said, his voice low and intense. "My heir. Do you have any idea what that means in my world? The danger it puts you in?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't ask to be part of your world." "But you are." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You became part of it the moment you let me take you to my bed. And now, with this pregnancy." He shook his head. "There is no going back to sorrow, not for either of us." A knock interrupted us. Antonio stepped back, his expression closing off. "Enter." Dante appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the shipment from Miss Collins's apartment has arrived." Antonio nodded. "Have everything brought to the Blue Suite. And tell Dr. Moretti I want him here at 1, not 2. I opened my mouth to protest the change, but Antonio silenced me with a look. "You should rest before he arrives," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "We'll continue our discussion later." Dismissed, I had little choice but to follow Dante upstairs, where movers were already unloading boxes and bags of my belongings. It was surreal, seeing my life packed up and transported here without my consent. I recognized my clothes, books, even the small potted plants I'd kept on my windowsill. "Everything from your apartment is here," Dante said, his tone efficient. "Mr. Russo has terminated your lease and settled any outstanding payments." The finality of it struck me like a physical blow. "He had no right," I whispered. Dante's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Russo does what is necessary to protect what's his." He glanced briefly at my midsection. "Especially now." Left alone, I mechanically began unpacking, hanging my clothes in the massive closet where they looked small and out of place. I arranged my books on a shelf, set my plants on the windowsill, placed my laptop on the desk, creating the illusion of choice, of control, when I had neither. Dr. Moretti arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes that somehow made the intrusion worse. Antonio joined us, standing silently in the corner as the doctor examined me with professional detachment. "The baby appears perfectly healthy," Dr. Moretti said after the ultrasound, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Strong heartbeat, good size for 14 weeks. Would you like to know the sex?" "You can tell already?" I asked, surprised. He smiled. "With reasonable certainty, yes." I hesitated, glancing at Antonio. His face remained impassive, but I could see the intensity in his eyes, the hunger to know. "Yes," I decided. "I want to know." Dr. Moretti pointed to the screen. "It's a girl. Congratulations to you both." A girl. My daughter. Antonio's daughter. I felt tears prick my eyes. The reality of this new life suddenly more concrete than ever before. When I looked at Antonio, I was shocked by what I saw. His mask had slipped, revealing raw emotion, wonder, pride, and something that looked almost like vulnerability. "A daughter," he said softly, more to himself than to me or the doctor. Dr. Moretti printed several copies of the ultrasound and wrote me prescriptions for prenatal vitamins and something mild for sleep. After he left, Antonio and I remained in silence, the knowledge of our daughter hanging between us. I never had a sister, Antonio finally said. Only brothers. I don't know much about girls. The unexpected admission, almost human in its uncertainty, caught me off guard. I'm an only child, I offered. I don't know much about children at all. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back. She will want for nothing. The best schools, the best opportunities, everything. Money isn't everything, I said quietly. She'll need love, safety, normalcy. He turned to face me. You think I cannot provide these things? I think your world makes them impossible. How can she be safe when you have enemies? How can her life be normal when her father... I trailed off, unable to finish. When her father is a monster, he supplied, his voice deceptively calm. Is that what you were going to say, Mia? I didn't answer, but my silence was confirmation enough. Antonio moved closer until he stood directly before me. Let me be very clear, Tesoro. I may be many things. Dangerous, ruthless, unforgiving to my enemies, but to my family? He shook his head. To my family, I am protection. I am safety. I am whatever they need me to be. Pretty words, I whispered. But they don't change who you are, or what you do. His fingers caught my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. No, they don't. I am what circumstances and choices have made me. But do not make the mistake of thinking I cannot compartmentalize. That I cannot be one man to the world, and another to my child. His thumb brushed my lower lip. To her mother. The intensity in his eyes made my heart race. Despite everything, despite knowing what he was capable of, my body responded to his proximity with a traitorous heat. He noticed, of course. A faint smile curved his lips. You still want me, even now, even knowing what you claim to know about me. I jerked away from his touch. Physical attraction isn't enough for what you're asking of me, for what you're demanding. It's a beginning, he said. The rest will come in time. And if it doesn't, his expression hardened, then we find a way to coexist for our daughter's sake. But you will stay, Mia, here, with me. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. Fear and something else, something I refused to acknowledge. I need some time, I said. To think. To process all of this. Antonio studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Take the rest of the day. Rest. Settle in. He moved toward the door, then paused. Join me for dinner tonight, 8 o'clock in the small dining room. It wasn't a request, but I nodded anyway, too exhausted to fight anymore today. Left alone, I curled on the bed, one hand resting protectively on my stomach. A daughter. We were having a daughter. The abstract concept of pregnancy had suddenly become so much more real. A little girl who would depend on me, on us, for everything. A girl who would be born into Antonio Russo's world, with all its danger and darkness. A girl who might one day look at her father with the same adoration I'd seen in the eyes of his men. Or worse, might follow in his footsteps. I closed my eyes, tears seeping from beneath my lids. How had my life come to this? Trapped in a gilded cage with a dangerous man, carrying his child, torn between fear of who he was and the undeniable pull he still exerted over me. And somewhere, in a corner of my heart I didn't want to examine too closely, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Antonio Russo than the monster I'd labeled him, the tenderness I'd glimpsed when he learned we were having a daughter, the care he'd taken with the breakfast, with the doctor's appointment, the fierce protectiveness that, while suffocating, came from a place I couldn't entirely condemn. I drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreams filled with shadowy figures and a small girl with Antonio's whiskey-colored eyes, reaching for me from behind bars of gold. Dinner with Antonio was a carefully choreographed affair. I'd chosen a simple black dress from my own clothes, modest but flattering, showing just enough to remind him of what we'd once shared without suggesting I was offering it again. My small act of defiance in a situation where I had precious little control. The small dining room was intimate, with just a table for 6 set with fine china and crystal. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. It was romantic. Deliberately so, I suspected. Antonio stood when I entered, his eyes tracking my movement with that predatory focus I remembered so well. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, no tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone to reveal a hint of tanned skin. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out my chair. I sat without acknowledging the compliment, though warmth bloomed in my chest against my will. A server appeared immediately with water and what looked like sparkling cider for me, wine for Antonio. "I hope you're feeling better after your rest," he said, taking his seat opposite me, "as well as can be expected for someone whose life has been hijacked," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the sharp words. Antonio's lips twitched. "Always so direct, it's one of the things that drew me to you initially. And here I thought it was just that I was convenient, the waitress you could summon whenever you wanted." His eyes flashed dangerously. "Is that what you think? That you were merely convenient?" I shrugged, sipping my water. "You're a powerful man. I imagine women throw themselves at you constantly." "They do," he acknowledged without false modesty. "And yet, I chose you. Only you, for those 2 weeks, and no one since." The admission startled me. "You expect me to believe that? That you've been celibate since I left?" "Believe what you want. It's the truth." He studied me over the rim of his wine glass. "Have you been with anyone else since me?" "That's none of your business." His expression darkened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Everything about you is my business now." "Because I'm carrying your child, that gives you ownership of my entire life?" "Because you are mine," he said simply, as if stating an obvious fact. "You have been since the first night. The child only makes it more official." The server returned with our first course. A light salad for me, some kind of seafood appetizer for Antonio. I picked at my food, suddenly not hungry despite the baby's needs. "You need to eat," Antonio said, noticing my reluctance. For her. The mention of our daughter, still so new, so strange to think about, made my hand instinctively move to my stomach. Antonio tracked the movement, his eyes softening fractionally. "Have you thought about names?" he asked, surprising me with the mundane question. I shook my head. "I've been too busy trying to figure out how to manage this situation." "This situation being our child? Or us? Both," I admitted. "I never planned for any of this." Antonio set down his fork. "Tell me something, Mia. If you hadn't seen what you saw that night, if you hadn't learned what I do, would you have told me about the baby?" The question caught me off guard. I considered lying, but something in his intent gaze made me answer honestly. "Yes," I said quietly. "Before that night, I would have told you." He nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. "And what did you think would happen when you told me? Before you knew the full extent of who I am?" I looked down at my plate. "I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead." "Liar," he said softly, without heat. "You must have had some expectation." I sighed, meeting his gaze again. "Fine. I thought maybe we could try to make something work. Some kind of co-parenting arrangement. I didn't expect declarations of love or marriage proposals, if that's what you're asking." "And now?" "Now I know better," I said, my voice hardening. "Now I know exactly who and what you are." The server returned to clear our plates and bring the main course. Herb-roasted chicken for me, steak for Antonio. The interruption gave me a moment to collect myself, to rein in the emotions threatening to spill over. "You think you know me," Antonio said once we were alone again. "You saw one moment, one necessary business decision, and you think you understand everything about who I am." "You ordered a man killed over dinner," I hissed, leaning forward. "Like you were ordering dessert." "That man was an informant who had gotten 3 of my people killed," Antonio replied, his voice dangerously calm. "He was selling information to a rival organization. His actions resulted in a bloodbath that could have been prevented." I sat back, chilled by the matter-of-fact way he discussed murder. "So that justifies it? In my world, yes." He cut into his steak with precise movements. "There are rules, Mia. Codes of conduct. When they're broken, there are consequences. And you're the one who decides those consequences?" He looked up, his eyes hard. "Yes. That's what it means to be in my position, to make the difficult decisions no one else can make." I shook my head. I can't accept that. I can't raise a child in a world where her father thinks killing people is just business. Antonio set down his knife and fork. Do you think I want our daughter involved in that part of my life? Do you think I wouldn't do everything in my power to keep her separate from it? How can she be separate from it when it's who you are? When it pays for all of this? I gestured around us at the opulent dining room. Because I will make it so, he said with absolute conviction. My father kept that separation for my mother. I didn't know what he really did until I was 16 years old. This surprised me. 16? Antonio nodded. My mother knew, of course, but she kept that knowledge from me and my brothers. She created a normal childhood for us. Despite everything, his expression softened with memory. Sunday dinners, school events, holidays, all the traditional things families do. I tried to imagine it. Antonio as a child, innocent of his father's true business, living what he believed was a normal life. It was harder to reconcile with the dangerous man before me. And when you found out at 16, I asked, what then? Something dark flashed across his face. That is a story for another time. I pressed on. Did you have a choice about joining this business? Or was it expected? There's always a choice, Mia, he said quietly. But some choices are harder than others. He took a sip of wine. I chose this life with my eyes open. I don't regret it. And our daughter? Will she have a real choice? His jaw tightened. My business will pass to my brother's sons, not to her. His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. She will be protected, educated, given every opportunity. She can become anything she wants, doctor, lawyer, artist, anything but this. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe our daughter could grow up normal despite her father's world. But doubt gnawed at me, and if your enemies find out about her, about me, what then? They won't, he said with deadly certainty, and if, by some failure of my security, they did. His expression turned predatory. They would not live long enough to act on that knowledge. A chill ran down my spine. This was the reality of the man across from me, capable of terrible violence in the name of protection. A man who saw killing as sometimes necessary. A man who would do anything to defend what he considered his. And now, that included me and our unborn daughter. The rest of dinner passed in strained conversation about safer topics. The renovations he was planning for the nursery, the doctor's recommendations for my health, the change of seasons approaching. It was almost normal, almost domestic, if I could forget who he was, what he did. But I couldn't forget. Not entirely. After dinner, Antonio suggested a walk through the gardens. The night air was cool, but not cold. Stars twinkling above us as we strolled along illuminated pathways through meticulously maintained grounds. My mother designed these gardens, he said as we passed a fountain. She loved flowers, said they brought beauty to counterbalance the ugliness in the world. She sounds wise, I said quietly. Antonio nodded. She was. She died when I was 25. Cancer. His voice held a rare vulnerability. There was nothing all my father's power and money could do to save her. I found myself reaching for his hand without thinking. He looked surprised at the gesture, but entwined his fingers with mine, his grip warm and secure. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it, about your mother. He squeezed my hand gently. She would have loved you, your spirit, your refusal to be intimidated even by me. A smile touched his lips, especially by me. We walked in silence for a while, hand in hand under the stars. In that moment, it was easy to forget everything between us. The fear, the anger, his world, and what it meant for our future. Easy to remember instead the way it had been during those 2 weeks, when I'd thought I could separate the man from what he did. What are you thinking? He asked, breaking the spell. I withdrew my hand from his, that this is all an illusion, a pretty fantasy that can't last. His expression hardened. It's only an illusion if you make it one. Reality has a way of intruding, I said. Sooner or later. We had reached a stone bench overlooking a small pond. Antonio gestured for me to sit, then joined me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body but not touching. "What would it take, Mia?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "What would it take for you to give us, a real chance? For our daughter's sake, if nothing else." I looked out over the dark water, collecting my thoughts. "I don't know if there's anything you could do or say that would make me comfortable with who you are, with what you do. I can't change the past," he said, "or who I am now. But the future?" He turned to face me fully. "For you and our daughter, I might be willing to reconsider certain aspects of my business." I stared at him, shocked by what seemed like an enormous concession. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I've been considering legitimizing more of my operations, moving away from certain activities." His expression was unreadable in the dim light. "It's a process that would take time, years perhaps, but it could be done." "Why would you do that?" I whispered. "For us?" His hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Because some things are worth changing for." The sincerity in his voice made my heart race. Was it possible? Could Antonio Russo, feared mafia boss, actually change? And even if he could, would it be enough? "I need more than words," I said, pulling away from his touch. "I need time, and proof." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Time you shall have. As for proof," he stood, offering me his hand. "That will come day by day, starting now." I hesitated, then placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me up. We walked back to the house in silence, his hand at the small of my back, protective, possessive. At the foot of the grand staircase, he paused. "Sleep well, Tesoro." He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Dream of the future, our future." I watched him walk away, conflicted emotions warring within me. Hope and skepticism, desire and fear, the memory of who we had been together, and the reality of who he was to the world. As I climbed the stairs to my suite, one hand resting on my stomach where our daughter grew, I wondered if Antonio Russo could truly change, and whether I could trust such a change if it came, or if, like everything else about him, it would prove to be a beautiful, dangerous illusion. 3 months passed in a strange domesticity. My body changed, the subtle curve of my stomach becoming more pronounced each week. Antonio was attentive in ways I hadn't expected, ensuring I ate properly, accompanying me to doctor appointments, even reading books on pregnancy and child development late into the night. We settled into a cautious routine. Breakfast together when his business allowed. Dinners almost every evening. Walks in the garden where conversation flowed more easily, away from the imposing walls of the mansion. But I remained in limbo, not quite prisoner, not quite free. I was allowed to leave the estate only with security, usually Dante or Pietro shadowing my every move. Shopping trips, prenatal yoga classes, even occasional lunches with Elena, who had tearfully apologized for betraying me to Antonio. "I was so worried about you," she'd said, clutching my hands across the restaurant table, while Dante watched impassively from nearby. "You were sick, losing weight instead of gaining it. I didn't know what else to do." I'd forgiven her. Understanding her concern had been genuine, even if her methods weren't what I would have chosen. Today marked a milestone, 28 weeks pregnant, the beginning of the 3rd trimester. I stood before the full-length mirror in my suite, studying my reflection. My hands cradled the definite bump where our daughter grew. She was active now, kicking and shifting, especially at night when I was trying to sleep. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Sophia with breakfast. Instead, Antonio entered, already dressed for the day in a slate-gray suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His eyes immediately went to my hands on my stomach, a possessive warmth entering his gaze. "Is she moving?" he asked, crossing to me. I nodded. "She's restless this morning." He hesitated, then asked, "May I?" This had become our dance, his careful requests to touch, to be part of this pregnancy, and my cautious allowances. Slowly, so slowly, the wall between us had begun to crumble, brick by brick. I took his hand and placed it where our daughter was most active. His palm was warm through the thin fabric of my nightgown, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew those hands possessed. A moment passed. Then his eyes widened as he felt a definite kick against his palm. "She's strong," he said, a hint of pride in his voice, like her father. I replied without thinking. His eyes met mine, surprise and pleasure evident in their whiskey depths, and stubborn like her mother, I suspect. A smile tugged at my lips despite myself. This was the Antonio few people saw, the man beneath the dangerous facade, capable of tenderness, of wonder at the small miracle growing between us. He reluctantly withdrew his hand. "I came to ask if you'd join me for dinner tonight, not here. There's a restaurant on the lake, very private, very secure." "A date?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. "If you like," he said, a rare smile softening his features. "I thought we might celebrate the 3rd trimester, and—" He hesitated, unusual for him. "I have something to show you, something important." Curiosity piqued, I nodded. "What time?" "I'll pick you up at 7. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Wear something nice. The blue dress, perhaps." The blue dress. One he'd bought me during our first time together, the color perfectly matching my eyes. I hadn't worn it since returning to his life, keeping it pushed to the back of the closet like the memories it evoked. "Antonio," I called as he reached for the door handle. He turned, eyebrows raised in question. "What are you showing me tonight?" His expression grew serious, the beginning of a promise kept. The restaurant was exactly as Antonio had described, perched on a bluff overlooking the lake, isolated and exclusive. We were seated in a private room with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the moonlight dancing on the water below. A single table waited, set with fine china and crystal, candles providing most of the illumination. I wore the blue dress as Antonio had suggested, though I'd had Sophia take it out slightly to accommodate my growing belly. Antonio's eyes had darkened appreciatively when he'd first seen me, his gaze lingering in a way that sent heat coursing through me despite everything. He was solicitous throughout dinner, attentive in a way that reminded me of our first weeks together. The conversation flowed easily as we discussed names for our daughter, a topic that had become less contentious as time passed. "I thought perhaps Sophia, after my mother," Antonio suggested as dessert was served. "It's beautiful," I acknowledged. "What about a middle name? Something from my family? Your mother's name?" I shook my head. "I never knew her. She left when I was a baby. It was something I rarely spoke about. A wound long scarred over but never fully healed." Antonio's expression softened with understanding. "Then perhaps your grandmother, Olivia," I said quietly. "My grandmother's name was Olivia, Sophia Olivia Russo." He tested the name, rolling it on his tongue. "It has a certain strength to it, don't you think?" The sound of our daughter's potential full name, complete with Antonio's surname, hung between us. Another small step toward a future I was still uncertain of. After dessert, Antonio checked his watch. "It's time. What I want to show you is nearby." Outside, Dante waited with the car. Antonio helped me into the back seat, his hand lingering on mine longer than necessary. We drove for perhaps 15 minutes, eventually turning onto a private road that wound through dense trees. "Where are we going?" I asked, peering through the darkness. "You'll see," Antonio replied, a hint of anticipation in his voice. The car finally stopped before a gate, which opened automatically as we approached. Beyond it, illuminated by subtle landscape lighting, stood a house, not as grand as Antonio's mansion, but beautiful in its own right. Modern architecture blended with natural materials, large windows looking out onto manicured grounds. "What is this place?" I asked, as Dante opened my door. Antonio helped me out, his hand steady at the small of my back. "Something new. Something different." He led me to the front door, which opened at his touch. Inside, the house was warmly furnished, stylish but comfortable, with none of the intimidating opulence of the mansion. "This is yours," Antonio said, watching my reaction carefully. "Yours and our daughter's, and mine, when you allow it." I turned to him, stunned. "I don't understand." He gestured for me to sit on one of the plush sofas, then joined me, leaving a respectful distance between us. 3 months ago, I promised I would change, that I would find a way to give you and Sophia a normal life away from certain aspects of my world. His eyes held mine, intense and sincere. "This is the first step. A new house?" I asked, confused. "A new beginning," he corrected. "This property is held in your name. Legally, it's yours, regardless of what happens between us." The implication that he was giving me a choice, an escape if I wanted it, was not lost on me. And the security, less obvious than at the mansion, but present. The grounds are monitored. Dante or Pietro would be nearby, but not in the house itself unless you requested it. He leaned forward slightly. "You would have privacy, independence." "Why?" I whispered, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why now?" Antonio was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because in these months together, I've come to realize something. Keeping you as a beautiful prisoner might ensure you stay physically, but it would kill something essential in you. He hesitated. "Something I've come to value above almost everything else." "Almost everything?" "Our daughter comes first," he said simply. "Always." I stood, needing to move, to think. I wandered through the house, taking in the details. A nursery painted in soft yellows and greens, a master bedroom with a view of the gardens, a kitchen designed for someone who actually cooked rather than relied on staff. Antonio followed at a distance, giving me space, letting me process. "There's more," he said as I completed my tour, returning to the living room. "Business matters." He withdrew a folder from his jacket and handed it to me. Inside were legal documents, complex, but with certain phrases that stood out. Legitimate enterprises, divestment of interests, restructuring. "What is this?" I asked, looking up at him. "Proof," he said simply. "I've begun the process of transitioning my more problematic holdings into legitimate businesses. It will take time, years, as I told you, but it has begun." His expression was solemn. "My brothers are not happy. Certain associates are concerned, but my decision is final." I stared at him, trying to absorb the magnitude of what he was saying. "You're really doing this? Leaving that life behind?" "Not overnight," he cautioned. "That would be dangerous for everyone, including you and Sophia. But gradually, yes." He moved closer, taking my hands in his. "I meant what I said that night in the garden, Mia. Some things are worth changing for." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. Whatever else Antonio Russo might be, in this moment, he was not lying to me. "Why?" I asked again, needing to understand. "Is it just for Sophia? For her safety?" He shook his head slowly. "It began that way, perhaps, but now..." His hand came up to cup my cheek. "Now it's for you as well. For us, if there can be an us." "Antonio, I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he interrupted gently. "Only that you consider the possibility. That you give us this, a real chance." His thumb brushed my lower lip. "Stay at the mansion until Sophia is born, where the medical facilities and security are strongest. After that, if you choose, this place will be waiting. Your place, where I would be a guest unless invited to be more." Tears pricked my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Was this real? Could the dangerous man who had forced me back into his life 3 months ago now be offering me freedom? Choice? "I need time," I whispered. "You have it," he assured me. "All the time you need." His hand slid to the nape of my neck, and slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he leaned in. His lips met mine, gentle at first, then with growing hunger as I responded despite myself. It had been months since he'd kissed me, since I'd allowed this connection between us, and my body remembered everything my mind had tried to forget. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his forehead rested against mine. "Come home," he murmured. "Think about everything I've shown you tonight. We'll talk more when you're ready." The drive back to the mansion passed in contemplative silence, his hand holding mine on the seat between us. My mind raced with possibilities, with fears, with tentative hope. That night, lying in my bed in the blue suite, one hand resting on my rounded belly where Sophia occasionally kicked, I allowed myself to truly consider a future with Antonio Russo. A man who was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, for his daughter, for me. I thought of the house by the lake, a compromise between captivity and freedom. I thought of the business documents, the first concrete evidence of his promised transformation. I thought of the way he'd kissed me, not demanding or possessive, but with a vulnerability I'd never expected from him. And somewhere in the early hours before dawn, as Sophia shifted restlessly beneath my palm, I made my decision. 6 weeks later, I went into labor 2 weeks early. The pain was unlike anything I'd experienced. Wave after wave of contractions that left me gasping. Antonio never left my side, his face pale with concern, as he held my hand, murmured encouragement, wiped sweat from my brow. "You're the strongest woman I know," he whispered as I pushed through another contraction. "You can do this, Tesoro." For 12 grueling hours I labored, cursing him colorfully in both English and the Italian phrases I'd picked up during our months together. He took it all without complaint, his eyes never leaving my face, his grip on my hand steady and sure. And then, with one final monumental effort, our daughter entered the world, red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. "Sophia Olivia Russo," the doctor announced, placing her on my chest. Through tears, I looked down at her tiny face, her shock of dark hair so like her father's. Antonio leaned close, one gentle finger tracing her cheek with a reverence I'd never seen in him before. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, like her mother. In that moment, watching this dangerous man transformed by love for his daughter, I knew we would find our way forward. Not perfect, perhaps not even conventional, but ours. A family forged in complicated circumstances but strengthened by choice, by change, by the tiny miracle now sleeping against my heart. 1 month later, we moved to the house by the lake. Antonio came to dinner each night, but left afterward, respecting my need for space, for autonomy, until the night I asked him to stay. "Are you sure?" he asked, searching my face for any sign of doubt. I nodded, taking his hand and leading him toward the bedroom we would now share. "I'm sure. We'll take it day by day, but I want to try. For real this time." His smile, rare, genuine, transformative, was answer enough as he followed me into our new beginning. The ultrasound that had changed everything now hung framed in Sophia's nursery, a reminder of the unexpected path that had led us here. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect resolution, but a hard-won second chance for 2 imperfect people and the daughter who had brought them together. And as Antonio wrapped his arms around me that night, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her crib down the hall, I knew that sometimes the most beautiful futures come from the most complicated beginnings.